So with our handsome Mr. Koda, I was going to work on a little bit of some loose leash walking. So remember how I mentioned equipment shouldn't be the thing that creates behavior, but should be there for safety reasons. So for example, his body harness would then be able to protect his neck. So if he happened to pull, he's not going to affect his trachea. So chewing, though, is still optional at times. So for Mr. Handsome, what I normally recommend for a lot of my students is to typically feed the dog on the side they're going to be on. You can feed across your body, but I do find it can be a little awkward for us. And then the dog tries to cut in front of you to reach the snacks that you're trying to give them throughout the loose leash walking practice. So loose leash walking, as I've mentioned, can be very helpful to do within the home front. So the reason I recommend to sometimes start off loose leash walking while they're in the home is that there's limited distractions while inside the house. So even if your home is rather small, Mr. K says he's completely forgot how to chew. My goodness, walking and chewing is hard. There we go, good job. So you'll see that at times I keep my hand low enough to keep his interest, but not so low that he is sometimes jumping to reach the hand. If you're finding he is a bit of a jumping jelly bean or he's taking his food kind of hard, that could also mean that he's overwhelmed or overexcited. So if he's not taking his snacks gently, that can sometimes be a barometer as to how he's feeling. So you can see that my rate of reinforcement is pretty high. So as we're walking around, I'm feeding every few steps that he takes. He's still having a moment of chewing problems. There we go, good job. So if your puppy blows past you and they go past your range, she's like, oh, I found the toys, then what can be beneficial is to practice helping him learn how to reorbit to you. So I know we mentioned this a little bit with the other puppy going into a front. A front position can be very helpful to bring them back facing you and then away from a distraction or something off in the distance. So as you're working with him, you notice my leash stays nice and relaxed. I like to have the leash almost hang as if it was like a J shape or like a smiley face. So there should be no constant leash pressure. If there's pressure from the dog, then that normally means he's overwhelmed or doesn't understand what is being asked of him. I always tell my students, think of your puppy as a furry little exchange student who is unaware as to what we want from them physically, verbally, or culturally. Oh my goodness. So as Mr. K is moving around, I'm feeding him for those moments where he's doing a great job and being sort of by my side. You can do this on the left or the right. So let's say instead you'd rather have him on your right side. You can then go ahead and practice both sides. I find it can be helpful. Oh my goodness, Mr. Koda does not know how to chew too well. So let's say, for example, he does a lot of hawking up of snacks. I noticed that some of the treats, well, obviously he was given kibble to practice with throughout the day as well, but sometimes certain training treats are very dry. And I sometimes like to throw in a little bit of cheese or something that's soft and squishy, because then they don't have such a dry item to try to put down their throats when they're tend to get caught that way. Nice. So you can see right now, again, my leash is nice and relaxed, and now it's on the opposite side. You could, for example, hold the gear on the same side as the puppy, but then what I find folks end up doing is as the gear is on the same side as the dog and now my snack is on the opposite, we tend to do this, and now the puppy cuts in front of your legs, and then they start to get a little confused as to where you want them. So if you're gonna feed, you have to then try to help feed on the side, so that way the puppy starts to understand that the reason he's getting fed is for being soft and next to you. So you'll see another good way for me to get Mr. K's attention is we also warmed up a little bit with what are called positive interrupters. That's where I sometimes will do a kissy noise, and it means to come check in for a paycheck. So if, let's say, your puppy tends to be a wild boy or girl, and they're sometimes about to do something like jump on the cabinets or go grab for a toy that's not really theirs, as opposed to me squealing, excuse me, I'm getting over a cold that I had like 3 weeks ago, and every once in a while I get a tickle. But for Mr. K, if every time I just squealed out no, remember that no doesn't teach him what you'd rather. So always think, what would I prefer from my dog versus what am I saying no to? And then either prevent him from getting good at that failure or give him options that you'd rather have him do. So let's say he didn't see that, find it. I'm going to toss another one. Yes. when he hears that little kissy noise and he checks in, I feed him for that. So I want him to think there's value in coming and reorienting back to me. So again, let's say we're going to warm up with a little bit more loose leash walking. We're going to do a little bit of movement. Yes. So I would also create a marker word. I tend to use the word yes, which means that whatever you're doing, that's why your paycheck is coming. So if let's say we were looking for loose leash walking, I sometimes would be going, he's like, chewing is so silly, but I would be going ahead and let's say Mr. K is by my side, I would go yes and then feed him for that. So I'm marking the moment he is correct in the behavior that I'd like to have happen again. So view all your skills as, let's say, for example, having a bank account. So if, let's say, sit tends to happen really easily for your beauty, it's more than likely it's had a lot of good deposits into the sitting bank account. So if there's certain ones that are not going quite as well, like loose leash walking or not jumping or whatever it might be, is think how many times have I given him reinforcements for the thing I'd rather have him do. So if loose leash walking tends to be really hard for a lot of the students because it's multifaceted, is then what I would recommend is break it down into steps. So let's say you didn't even have your leash on because maybe let's say gear on in the home is a bit hard or you find it's awkward in the beginning. Oh my goodness, sir. I like to start off, he's like, chewing is for losers. You just eat it whole. So I like to start off sometimes also with dogs loose in the home. And then that way you might even practice. Let's say he goes and he does a find it and you make it fun to come back into your space. And of course that one went right into the crack. He says, gosh darn it, yes. So we might warm up with this lovely reorientation back to me. So there he goes to do another little find it. Yes. Good job. He's like, lady, I dropped it. It's right here, sir. So then from, let's say, doing a little bit with this positive interrupter and checking back in, you notice that a lot of the foundation skills start with getting your puppy to reorient to you and hone in on you versus the environment. So as you're practicing, I like to go ahead with no gear whatsoever, having both my hands available. Yes. So right there, you got a little distracted by a noise and then came running because he heard a little kissy noise. Good job, sir. So as I'm practicing, you can also do loose leash practice, like I mentioned a little bit earlier with Mr. Z, is you could have your puppy just be meandering in your home front, and then you start walking, and as your puppy comes into your space, you feed them for that. You could then go the opposite direction, and let's say again he goes and meanders, he's gonna go check out, there's a water dish off in the corner too to rehydrate throughout the practice. And he says, oh wait, he found one of the chews that's also out, so if they wanna take a little break, he's like, yes, I would love one. So you'll see that a lot of times I offer a lot of the babes throughout the doggy day school moments to take breaks and be able to do things that bring them joy or help calm them. So licking, for example, nice job, sir. Licking is a great way to help your puppy's anxiety or excitement go down while also sort of soothing them. So while they're licking or gnawing, it also releases extra serotonin and dopamine into their system, which helps them feel more secure, happy, and it's those happy feelings. So right now he's just getting a little drink of water. Nice. And then I'm going to get his attention back on me. Ready? Koda. Yes. So right there, just a little bit of lovely name recognition. You can, again, do that little find it, get your boy distracted, and then go, Koda. Yes. Work a little bit with that name recognition again. Ready? Find it. Koda. And this is, again, the beginning stages of your recall, too. So you could practice this where he's bouncing back and forth between, let's say you have a family member or a friend, and they could have a couple snacks, you could have a couple snacks, and even in the house, one person could call the pup, he goes running to them, then the next person calls the pup, and he goes back and forth between the two people. I would make sure, though, that you're not doing so many recalls that your babe just wants to call it quits. So be careful that your exercise or your practice, yes, is not so long that it turns into almost doggy boot camp. We want him to think that practicing with us and learning these weird skills are not too overwhelming or flustering or just too much work. Excuse me. So remember, if you were to think about learning or creating behavior for down the road, if let's say every rung to the ladder was bigger and further away and you could barely reach them, the problem there is then your pup will probably never really attain the level of behavior or skill set you were hoping, because we sometimes start with really big steps and then that's very unattainable for most. So make sure that when you're working with him, sit, yes, that you're feeding for even glimmers of the behavior you were hoping for. So sometimes, again, we might lure the puppy into a position. Other times we might capture a moment. So capturing a position would be, let's say he all of a sudden gave you a gorgeous sit or down and you go, yes, you mark the behavior and you feed them for that response that he gave you by himself. So capturing is almost like capturing a moment in time, like a photograph. Luring, for example, sounds very similar. So it's you're luring the puppy, like almost with the fish with the worm on the hook, and you're luring them into a position or behavior change. Remember, luring is one of the fastest ways to create behavior, but you want to fade out the lure. So if your babe is only working because the food is presented first, you want to eventually empty the hand. You might even have your snack in the opposite hand. And let's say we're looking to do a stand position. I will have him target my hand, but there's no food, and then yes to feed. So eventually the verbal and visual cues are the bringer of the behavior. So I don't really love the wordage, but this makes a lot of sense to people, is view a bribe as something you get before the skill. So I'll bribe you with a lollipop to go clean up my laundry. So the bribe is given before the work is then performed. So almost like your lure. Then, for example, your paycheck would be something you would get for after the work was accomplished. So let's say you picked up, excuse me, you picked up all the laundry. Now I'm giving you, let's say, a little paycheck, like an allowance for doing such a great job picking it all up. So you want to view luring in the beginning as almost, I don't love it, but view it as the bribe to create the behavior. Later, you get the behavior, sit, and then you feed after as if it was a paycheck. So remember, no dog walks up to another dog and says, let's do a downstay for fun, or let's do some recalls, or loose leash walking. So all of these skills or behaviors are things that we deem beneficial, sit, but then the pups start to find value in it because we've been reinforcing them for their hard efforts. So remember, reinforcing with food is a great way to create behavior and build skill set and even boost confidence. But eventually you might turn it into intermittent reinforcement. But remember, you want to start off first with probably luring, capturing, and at all the other times shaping for skills. So let's say, for example, let's pretend Mr. Handsome didn't know how to do a down position, but he was doing a downward facing dog, so his butt's up, but his front end is down. I would still feed him for the beginning stages of that down position. Eventually, I would only feed for the closer position to down. And then eventually, the only thing that would get him a snack would be to do the full down position. Shaping can also be done like with free shaping. I'll be sending you guys more information. I know the previous puppy or doggy day school students have already had some of this material sent along to them, but I can always resend it to the whole group anyway. But I know I sent a few documents already out to his mom so she could review some of the material as well. So again, we get that little sit and then yes to feed. Nice job. So we might do a little stand and then feed for that. And then if we're trying to get that lovely down position, I tend to help them with their bum on the ground first and then try to lower, yes, and then go ahead and feed. So even if you don't get the chance to say the cue word instantly, I find in the beginning, stand, that you can just start practicing getting them physically to go into the position, yes. And even if you don't get to say sit down or stand or whichever slogan you prefer, your baby is still getting a reinforcement for the moment they were successful in that behavior. So let's say for that down again, I'm going to lure him into the ground and then yes to feed. So if you're about 80 to 90% certain they're going to give you the behavior or offer that skill, you could then start to ask with the verbal cue. So I might go sit and then yes to feed. And then let's say stand, yes, and feed for that. And then if let's say maybe he might be one of the boys or girls that enjoys doing a down but from a sitting position. So again, he gets excited sometimes, no big deal. So I'm going to try from a standing position to see if I can get him to lower. Beautiful. And there he goes into a down. Yes. So sometimes if your babes find downs to be a little trying, I also jackpot behavior to create more value around that position or behavior set. Nice job. But you'll see that I'm feeding for each skill as he's offering it. This way, again, he finds value in each different position. If we were to take one snack and do all 3 puppy push-ups, which would be your sits, your downs, and your stands, or up, then your babe might not realize which one is which, and they start to clump all these different behaviors together just to get the one snack at the end. But then later, they may not know each individual task. So I would recommend, even if you're doing sits and stands and puppy push-ups, is to feed for each behavior as you get it. So we might go into another little stand and then feed for that. Then we might go into a little sit, because that one he knows quite well, and I'm gonna feed for that, yes. And then we might go into another little down, yes, and feed, so very nice. So puppy push-ups, great way to add some mental but physical enrichment. Obviously, as he gets more fluid, you won't have to do as much of an exaggerated, lowering your whole hand to the ground. So again, stand, yes, nice job. And then we can go into another little sit, beautiful. But I'd make sure to end your practice before he starts to have a hard time. So if, let's say, he's working the whole time and then he's fizzling down or he's getting especially mouthy, then that means he's getting overtired. So he's been given some beautiful tail wags too. Excuse me. So for example, when you're looking to your dog, I know a lot of times people will say like, oh, just look to the tail, see how they're feeling. Remember that would be like me saying, I'm going to give you a sentence and here it comes, the. And just the and no other information doesn't tell you much about that sentence. So same thing with your dog. You can't go based off of only one body part. You'd have to go for the whole body. So with a dog that's lacking in a tail or ears or has a pushed in face, a lot of those babes are sometimes misinterpreted because of the fact that their bodies are a little different when it comes to what they have for communication. So if your dog, for example, is a little bit unsure about something or excited, they're going to communicate through their full body. So it would be their facial expressions, their ears set, their body posture, their tail set, if they have one or a shorter one. So make sure that if you're unaware of dog body language, it's one of my favorite things to have all my students read up on. So I have sent along some visuals and also some great book resources. Do not feel you have to go out and get anything you don't want, but I do recommend the more knowledge you have about how they're trying to communicate, the less chances there are for misinterpretations, and then us maybe even adding to the confusion or behavior problem that we didn't love in the first place. So the more we understand where they're coming from, the better we have at creating this really nice relationship with our babes that will last a lifetime, but that also makes sure we're setting them up for success when things do get a little bit iffy or he's a little bit unsure about something or too excited. So, but Mr. K did a very nice job for his first day at Doggy Day School, and then we'll work some more skills as we're going along the week.